What if Mariah Carey's career wasn't just overshadowed, but intentionally dismantled? Not by chance, not by bad luck, but by a system that allegedly used Beyoncé and Jennifer Lopez to erase her legacy and replace her with more controllable stars. We're not talking about petty shade or industry gossip. We're talking about stolen songs, hijacked samples, and deep-seated power moves that rewrote pop music history. All while Mariah was screaming into the void. And now? Rumor has it she's finally ready to tell us everything. But before the truth drops, let's rewind the clock and examine the long, messy, and allegedly orchestrated takedown of the original vocal queen herself. Because if what insiders are saying is true, Beyoncé and J.Lo didn't just rise to the top, they stepped over Mariah Carey to get there. Before the Bayhive was buzzing and before J.Lo was dancing on rooftops, Mariah Carey was the blueprint. In the 90s, she was untouchable. Not only was she topping charts year after year, she was doing it on her own terms, writing her own songs, producing her own albums, and cultivating a glamorous, mysterious image that was completely self-defined. She wasn't just a pop star, she was a genre-blending phenomenon, merging R&B, gospel, hip-hop, and pop with effortless elegance. She wasn't handed anything, she built it. As a multiracial woman in an industry notorious for sidelining women of color, her dominance was revolutionary. And the ripple effects? Massive. A whole generation of girls grew up trying to copy her whistle notes and emulate her stage presence, including a young Beyoncé who once called Vision of Love the very reason she started singing. Mariah wasn't just the queen of vocals, she was the origin story for some of today's biggest stars. There was a time when Beyoncé spoke about Mariah Carey with absolute reverence. In early interviews, she couldn't hide her admiration, calling Vision of Love the song that made her want to sing and praising Mariah's vocal range like it was otherworldly. You can even find clips of young Beyoncé watching Mariah perform with wide-eyed awe, absorbing every riff, every whistle note, every flourish. For a young artist finding her voice, Mariah wasn't just an inspiration. She was the blueprint. She had done the impossible, dominate the charts while writing and producing her own music, all while maintaining complete creative control. Beyoncé saw that and respected it, at least in the beginning. But something quietly shifted. The public shout-outs stopped, the inspiration quotes faded, and over the years, Beyoncé's once vocal admiration for Mariah vanished into silence. Fans began to notice, and some believe it wasn't accidental. As Beyoncé's brand evolved from powerhouse vocalist to cultural icon, her image was being molded into something bigger than just music. Her team wanted to position her as the next Michael Jackson or Prince, someone whose influence extended beyond vocals into politics, fashion, and global impact. And for that strategy to work, comparisons to Mariah, the glittery, emotional, high-maintenance diva, no longer served her narrative. It wasn't just a rebrand, it was a distancing. The heartbreak for longtime fans isn't just that Beyoncé stopped mentioning Mariah. It's what that silence represents. When the industry saw Mariah as too much, too glamorous, too outspoken, too emotional, Beyoncé's quiet pivot felt like a calculated move to leave that legacy behind. It's as if the woman who inspired Beyoncé's vocal style was no longer useful to her image, and so she was erased. For a star who once fangirled over every note Mariah sang, the silence became deafening. And for many, it felt like the start of a carefully orchestrated rewriting of pop history, one where the woman who paved the way was no longer even acknowledged. Here's where the story takes a turn, from personal admiration to calculated industry strategy. Because in the music world, talent alone doesn't guarantee success. There's always a machine operating behind the curtain, quietly deciding who gets the spotlight and who gets left behind. And Beyoncé, brilliant as she is, didn't climb the ranks on artistry alone. Her partnership with Jay-Z, one of the most powerful figures in music, positioned her at the center of a web of influence. We're talking streaming services, record label execs, fashion houses, press outlets, award show producers, all with a direct line to her empire. In an industry ruled by perception, connections like these aren't just helpful, they're career-defining. According to multiple music insiders, there were subtle but strategic moves happening behind the scenes. Certain artists were being ushered into the mainstream with curated playlist placements, high-profile magazine covers, and priority slots at major events. Meanwhile, others, especially those who didn't play along, were slowly phased out. Mariah Carey, known for her emotional honesty and refusal to conform, reportedly became a problem for the gatekeepers. She was too outspoken, too unfiltered, and in an era where clean, controllable narratives ruled, Mariah didn't fit. Her artistry didn't falter, but her image no longer aligned with the industry's vision for the future of pop. And so, the machine allegedly turned its attention to someone safer, more compliant, and more brand-friendly, Beyoncé. That shift wasn't about who could sing better, it was about who could be packaged better. Beyoncé was a multi-platform brand with global appeal. She played the media game perfectly, rarely gave off-script interviews, and allowed her image to be tightly managed. In contrast, Mariah was raw, emotional, and unpredictable. Qualities that once made her iconic, but now made her expendable. The result? A slow but unmistakable sidelining of one of the most powerful vocalists of all time. Not because she wasn't relevant, but because the gatekeepers had already chosen their next queen, and once the industry makes its decision, it rarely looks back. In contrast, Mariah was raw, emotional, and unpredictable. Qualities that once made her iconic, but now made her expendable. The result? A slow but unmistakable sidelining of one of the most powerful vocalists of all time. Not because she wasn't relevant, but because the gatekeepers had already chosen their next queen, and once the industry makes its decision, it rarely looks back. If Beyoncé's rise was subtle and strategic, Jennifer Lopez's alleged involvement in Mariah Carey's downfall was a full-blown, behind-the-scenes ambush. The year was 2001, and Mariah was pouring her soul into the Glitter soundtrack, a project she hoped would be a triumphant creative moment following her divorce from music mogul Tommy Mottola. She had locked in a sample from Yellow Magic Orchestra's 1978 track Firecracker for her lead single, Loverboy. Everything was set, until the unthinkable happened. Just before her release, the exact same sample showed up on Jennifer Lopez's album. And not just in a background beat, but prominently featured on her track, I'm Real. It felt like deja vu with a dagger attached. According to Mariah, this wasn't some innocent overlap, it was a calculated move. Her ex-husband Tommy Mottola, still a dominant force at Sony Music, allegedly handed the sample to J.Lo after Mariah had already secured it. Why? To sabotage her, to humiliate her, to make sure her new chapter would crash before it even began. Mariah later wrote in her memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, that Tommy was enraged by her departure and used his industry power to derail her career. This wasn't a random setback. It was a personal vendetta backed by a multi-million-dollar machine. Mariah's version of Loverboy got shelved. Sony rushed out J.Lo's version. And the public? They never knew what was stolen behind the scenes. What's worse, there are whispers that J.Lo knew all along, that she was fully aware the sample had already been promised to Mariah. But instead of bowing out, she allegedly played along, securing her spot as the label's new favorite. The results were brutal. Glitter bombed, not necessarily because of the music, but because the media tore it apart. Mariah's image took a massive hit. She was labeled unstable, emotional, difficult. Meanwhile, J.Lo's career skyrocketed with chart-topping singles, red carpet appearances, and a full-court industry push. One woman was silenced, the other was celebrated. And for many fans, that marked the moment Mariah Carey wasn't just overlooked, she was systematically replaced. It was only 3 words: I don't know her. But those words exploded across pop culture like a grenade. When Mariah Carey was asked in an early 2000s interview about Jennifer Lopez, she didn't rant, she didn't explain. She simply smiled and delivered what became one of the most iconic lines in music history. On the surface, it was shade. Legendary shade. But for those who had followed the behind-the-scenes drama between the two artists, it wasn't just a dig. It was a scar. A quiet response to an industry betrayal that had left Mariah blindsided, humiliated, and in many ways, erased. That moment wasn't just about ego, it was survival. In later interviews, Mariah expanded on what those 3 words really meant. She wasn't being petty, she was drawing a line. Mariah built her career from the ground up. She wrote her own lyrics, composed her melodies, arranged her harmonies, and stood behind a microphone and delivered every note. Jennifer Lopez, by contrast, had long been accused of relying on ghost singers, background vocalists, and lip-syncing during live performances. One interview revealed the depth of Mariah's frustration when she said, "If I had the luxury of not having to sing my own songs, darling, I'd sleep 8 hours too." It was a mic drop, not just aimed at J.Lo, but at an industry that had rewarded replication over originality. What made it worse was that this wasn't just about music, it was about legacy. Mariah wasn't watching a peer rise beside her. She was watching someone allegedly profit off her work, her style, and even her samples, while the media painted her as the unhinged diva and J.Lo as America's sweetheart. The shade wasn't just personal, it was protective. A way for Mariah to reclaim power in a situation where her voice had been stolen, both literally and symbolically. And that now iconic line, "I don't know her," became more than a meme. It became a battle cry for artists who were tired of being used and discarded by the very industry they helped build. Just when you thought it couldn't get more calculated, enter the Ashanti factor, a story that cracked open the truth behind some of Jennifer Lopez's biggest hits. Songs like "I'm Real," "Ain't It Funny," and even the Fat Joe classic "What's Love" weren't just inspired by other artists. They were built on Ashanti's vocals. According to Ashanti herself, she not only wrote and arranged the songs, she actually laid down full vocal tracks as references, tracks that were later used without proper credit. And the voice you hear on the final product? Often it's not even fully J.Lo. It's Ashanti in the background, sometimes even on the chorus, giving the songs their soul while Lopez received the applause. Ashanti eventually opened up about the emotional weight of watching someone else reap the rewards of her work. She described it as frustrating and disheartening, seeing her melodies, her lyrics, and even her ad-libs become chart toppers for someone else. In a 2022 interview, she spoke candidly about how the industry thrived on smoke and mirrors, and how credit in music should never be optional. Rapper Fat Joe also confirmed what fans had suspected for years. "What's Love" was originally meant for Ashanti, but behind the scenes there was a push to hand it to J.Lo instead. And the reason? The same reason the industry handed her Mariah's samples, because J.Lo was easier to mold, easier to promote, and easier to control. It wasn't just about vocals, it was about optics. The early 2000s music industry was desperate to find a crossover star who was Latina, marketable, and most importantly, compliant. Ashanti had too much edge, Mariah had too much power. But J.Lo? She was the industry's blank canvas. Behind her rise were voices the public never fully heard, stories the media didn't report, and talents like Ashanti, left in the shadows while someone else took the spotlight. And when you realize how many of J.Lo's hits were built on the backs of black women whose contributions were minimized or erased, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. On the surface, Beyoncé and Jennifer Lopez couldn't be more different. Beyoncé is hailed as a vocal powerhouse, an artist whose live performances are studied and revered, whose control over her brand is meticulous. Jennifer Lopez, by contrast, has built her fame more on image, choreography, and branding deals than on vocal acclaim. One is known for her powerhouse ballads. The other is known for her red carpet presence. But dig a little deeper, and the similarities become impossible to ignore and deeply unsettling. Both women began their careers showering Mariah Carey with praise. They called her an icon, a vocal inspiration, a blueprint. But once their stars began to rise, the public tribute stopped. The admiration vanished. And in its place, silence. What's more, both Beyoncé and J.Lo benefited from massive industry backing, support that helped push them forward while Mariah was being quietly edged out. Beyoncé had Jay-Z and an entire network of corporate allies steering her toward cultural dominance. J.Lo had Sony's top brass and Tommy Mottola himself, strategically placing her in roles, campaigns, and charts once occupied by Mariah. And this all happened while Mariah was struggling with label sabotage, tabloid smears, and mental health challenges that were amplified by the media instead of protected from it. Fans began to notice the timing. As Mariah was being discredited, disrespected, and discarded, two women who once idolized her were suddenly the faces of a new generation, and neither of them said a word. So the question remains, was it a coincidence? Or was it part of a larger machine that rewards silence and punishes resistance? Beyoncé and J.Lo may have walked different paths, but the result was eerily similar. Both rose as Mariah fell. Both remained silent while she was dragged. And both, knowingly or not, stepped into the space Mariah had carved out first. Meanwhile, Mariah, the woman who refused to play the game, who demanded credit, and who always spoke her mind, was labeled difficult and cast aside. Whether this was personal or systemic is something only the people involved truly know. But for fans, the pattern speaks volumes. If you thought Mariah Carey was done speaking her truth, think again. Rumors swirling from insiders close to the singer suggest that something major is brewing, whether it's a second memoir, a raw Netflix documentary, or a no-holds-barred industry expose. And if it drops, it could shake the very foundation of pop music history. We're talking unreleased emails, label documents, studio receipts, and maybe even unreleased demos, pulling back the curtain on the sabotage, the stolen songs, and the silence that surrounded her downfall. This wouldn't be gossip. It would be facts, timelines, proof. From the glitter scandal and Tommy Mottola's alleged sabotage to J.Lo's vocal controversies and Beyoncé's strategic distancing, Mariah might finally name names. And if she does, the internet won't just react, it'll explode. Because this story is no longer just about rivalry or petty industry drama. It's about legacy. About a woman who helped shape the sound of an entire generation being systematically erased while others filled the space she created. For years, the narrative was controlled by media handlers, executives, and powerful PR teams. But now, for the first time, the pen is in Mariah's hand. And fans are ready. Not just for revenge, but for resolution. Because if even a fraction of what she's reportedly holding back sees the light, the world will finally understand what Mariah Carey endured to survive in an industry that tried to silence her. For years, Mariah Carey was framed as the difficult diva, the glittery punchline. But if even half of these claims are true, then she wasn't difficult. She was dangerous to an industry that wanted to control women, erase talent, and rewrite history. They didn't sideline her because she faded. They erased her because she threatened the narrative. And now, after decades of silence, the woman who inspired Beyoncé outsang every chart-topping peer and got her melodies stolen and repackaged for someone else might finally be ready to speak. So the only question left is, when Mariah talks, will anyone be ready to hear what she has to say?